Okay, we're ready for another social studies lesson today, and today's a review of the Boston Tea Party. I think you'll enjoy this little video in the slideshow. But this lesson is called An Odd Sort of Tea Party. Have any of you girls ever had a tea party with your stuffed animals, maybe? Well, here's an even odder tea party. There's an illustration up here. It's meant to show what it might have been like on the board, the ships at the Boston Tea Party. So today's social studies lesson is going to be just like yesterday's. I'm going to read through the slides, and then you can go back and look at the slides on your own after this video. And then there'll be an assignment with 10 questions about this text. All right, so let's get into the text here. Chapter 5, and these are not from your textbooks. These are from a little book that I had bought for my class a few years ago. So they just have a lot of neat information our textbook leaves out. An odd sort of tea party. After several years of protest, most of the taxes that were part of the Townshend Acts were appealed, except the tax on tea. At that time, tea was a very popular drink in the colonies. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act. Although it did not impose an additional tax, the Tea Act continued the tax on tea that had been created by the Townshend Acts. So it wasn't a new tax, it just said, we're going to keep taxing you on your tea. Do you like tea? Would you want to pay a lot of extra money for tea? I wouldn't, and the colonists didn't either. Organizations such as the Sons of Liberty had meetings in cities all over the colonies. They came up with a plan to protest the tax on tea. In December 1773, 7 ships carrying tea were docked in Boston. About 100 protesters dressed up like American Indians, kind of like a disguise. They dressed up like that. Then they boarded the 3 ships, and they dumped 342 large boxes of tea into Boston Harbor. Lucky for the fish, right? This act of protest later became known as the Boston Tea Party. Within a few days, similar tea parties took place in other coastal cities, such as New York City and Charleston. I went to Charleston, my wife and I did, with Mr. Mills and his wife, and we were there in the Charleston Harbor, and we were reading about the Charleston Tea Party. I had never heard of it. I've always heard of the Boston Tea Party, but they did the same thing down in Charleston, South Carolina. In the weeks and months after the Boston Tea Party, the names of the people who took part in the event were kept secret. In fact, only one person was jailed for throwing boxes of tea into Boston Harbor. However, today, we know the names of 116 people who took part in the event. None of these people are known to us as leaders in the American Revolution. In fact, the only famous person associated with the Boston Tea Party was Samuel Adams, who spoke at a meeting attended by many of the people who actually threw the tea in the harbor. Intolerable acts. The tea parties that took place throughout the colonies angered King George III and the British Parliament. In 1774, Parliament punished the colonies, Boston in particular, by passing a series of laws which the colonists called the Intolerable Acts. We've heard about these before. Remember, this is just a review. One of the Intolerable Acts closed the port of Boston until the colonists had paid for the tea that had been destroyed in the Boston Tea Party. This meant ships were not allowed to come and go from Boston Harbor. Another of the Intolerable Acts, called the Quartering Act, required colonists to provide food and shelter to British soldiers whenever they needed it. King George III thought the Intolerable Acts would lead Americans to turn against groups such as the Sons of Liberty and the people who had destroyed the tea in protest. However, just the opposite happened. In churches, public buildings, and homes all over the colonies, public opinion turned against King George III and the British government. Although not everyone agreed that the Boston Tea Party was a good idea, the British government's decision to punish all the colonies did not go over well. Has your whole class ever had to sit out a recess because one person was talking? Yeah, that makes you mad, doesn't it? Well, the colonies are kind of feeling like that. These people in Boston threw the tea in the harbor, and now everybody's getting punished. So they're getting mad at the king. In August 1774, a Virginia planter named Thomas Jefferson wrote and published a pamphlet called A Summary View of the Rights of British America. It argued that the British Parliament did not have the right to rule the 13 colonies. This document made Jefferson famous. Wow, he wrote this before the Declaration of Independence. He wrote this saying, we shouldn't be ruled by Britain. They're too far away. In September 1774, 12 of the 13 colonies sent delegates to a big meeting in Philadelphia to discuss the situation. The meeting later became known, we've read about this too, haven't we, as the First Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress did two things. First, it called for a boycott of all British goods, which meant that people from all over the colonies were told not to buy or use anything made in Great Britain. So they said, fine, you're going to charge us taxes on your British stuff? We're just not going to buy it then, dude. The First Continental Congress also sent King George III a petition or request asking him to withdraw or take away the Intolerable Acts. By this time, however, some thought the time for talking was past. In March 1775, Patrick Henry made a famous speech in Virginia. With people such as Washington and Jefferson in the room, Henry said, "Gentlemen may cry, 'Peace, peace,' but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take." And here's what he's famous for saying. "But as for me, give me liberty or give me death." All right, there's your text for today. Old Patrick Henry, he's fired up. He's trying to get everybody to go fight the British. We know that fight's going to come, isn't it? Okay, you can go back and look at these pages as you answer your 10 multiple choice questions about this text in your social studies assignment for today.